what's the relationship between sugar and cancer? And then how does that impact the foods that we consume?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I get asked this a lot. What I try to do is to make people feel comfortable with the idea that our body needs sugar. In fact, the organ in our body that needs the most sugar is our brain. Sugars fuels our metabolism. And the key is that in most people who are able to, your body is able to process a small amount of sugar without a problem, without any problem whatsoever. And so the sugars that you might encounter in your whole foods, so fruits and vegetables, those are completely fine. Your body should be able to take care of that. It's the sugars that are dangerous for diseases and the sugars that damage your microbiome, that spark inflammation, that can even damage your DNA. That's the concept of added sugar. So it's a can of soda that's got 10 tablespoons of added sugar to it to make it really sweet. No human body can tolerate that over any period of time. And so what I try to say is that, like, it's so easy, so tempting when it comes to something like sugar to go for that all or nothing approach. No, our body needs a little sugar. Your body can actually handle most sugar. When it comes in a fruit or a vegetable, it's just fine. Added sugar, candies, cakes, sodas, okay, those are the ones that easily overwhelm you. So if you're sensitive to sugar, just like you've got diabetes, you got to sort of cut down or cut out those things and be super mindful of making those type of choices. But fruits and vegetables, you have to look at the human data. Okay, don't focus on how much sugar is in a mango. Mango is pretty sweet fruit. Take a look at the human data to show that people who eat mango and other tropical fruits have a much lower incidence of disease X and Y and Z. Look, you can't argue with the science, and you can't argue with the data. Sugar itself, nothing that's natural is by itself inherently evil. And I think that's the thing that I'm trying to get people to think about with sugar. It's a matter of source, it's a matter of quantity, and a matter of degree.
Yeah. So I want to be very respectful to your time. I've not even scratched the surface of what I wanted to talk to you about, so maybe we can set up another conversation in the future at some point. But just to finish off the sort of cancer conversation, I'd love to mention before we end a few sort of more helpful foods, like mushrooms, for example, that you would recommend people focus on. But where does fasting fit into this? Because we talked about the addition of foods into our diet to help us repair DNA and such like. But there's also a case, isn't there, to actually withdraw foods from our body for a set period of time to help us heal and repair as well, right?
Right. So again, similarly to how we were just talking about sugar, fasting is another topic that's captured the public attention, and people think of sort of fasting as extremes. I think that we tend to think when foods in terms of extremes. Here's the science. We know that the body needs a certain number of calories just to function in its ordinary state. And we know that if you're lost in the desert and you don't have any food, you're not going to be eating, you're going to starve to death. And at some point, your body's going to run out of energy and your systems are going to collapse and you'll just shrivel up in a desert and be dead. Now, we also know that if you pound yourself and you overload yourself with calories, you're going to be unhealthy, metabolically unhealthy. You can develop diabetes, you can develop all these other chronic diseases, a chronic inflammatory state, and you're going to gain weight. And when you gain weight, the fat tissue actually is also more inflammatory. So these are the extremes you want to avoid. You don't want to die in a desert, starve, and nor do you want to actually balloon up and become deadly unhealthy, as I call it. All right. Having spelled out those bookends, let's talk about what the science tells us. The science tells us that if we restrict our calories, okay, that's called fasting. Periods that we don't eat. By the way, we all fast. When you're sleeping, you're fasting. That's why they call it the morning meal breakfast, breakfast, is because we're actually breaking our evening fast. So fasting is something we do. It doesn't have to be extreme, but we do know that when we actually restrict our calories, wonderful things happen to our health defense systems. It all comes back to our health defenses. It turns out It helps your body by restricting calories, intermittent fasting. Our body's defenses and angiogenesis help to starve cancer. It kind of helps our body cut off the blood supply to cancers. We know that when you actually intermittently fast, you call out more stem cells. Your stem cells kind of reboot, and then the fresh ones come out. So it's kind of like trying to think like changing the batteries in a flashlight. You get refreshment. We know when you intermittently fast, it also reboots your gut microbiome.
Yeah.
So, it kind of takes away some of the bad neighbors and some fresh neighbors, better neighbors that reorganize the neighborhood. We also know that intermittent fasting helps to repair your DNA, and it even slows down cellular aging at the level of the caps on the end of your DNA, the telomeres that burn down normally during aging. Intermittent fasting slows that aging process down at the cellular level. And inflammation, intermittent fasting, by the way, helps us develop a more fortified immune system, because part of the reboot at the stem cell level is to make new immune cells. So we've got fresh super soldiers produced coming right out of the oven to help our immune system. So these are ways that intermittent fasting has been shown to help our defenses. Doesn't mean that you have to do it all the time. It means that this is another technique we can use to kind of up our game periodically when it comes to our health.
Is it something you do in your own life?
The answer is yes. And I've been doing this since medical school. I don't know if this was your experience, but man, when I was in medical school, I have to say it was difficult for me to have 3 square meals a day, as they say. I would sometimes miss breakfast. I would sometimes miss lunch. I would try not to miss dinner, but sometimes I wouldn't have a meal because I was so crazy busy. And I think I naturally, over the course of a week, probably skip 3 meals a week. And that you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to be a robot to do intermittent fasting. Skipping a few meals a week actually is helpful for your body.
Sounds like you were intermittent fasting by accident before it even became a thing. Final 2 quick questions, if I can. Could you leave the listeners with some kind of top foods that you would ideally have them focus on? Appreciate that actually it's very hard to distill everything down to that. But also, you wrote your book. We're recording this end of January 2022. It came out, from what I can tell, March 2019, almost 3 years ago. If you were writing the book now, what new information would you put in it that you weren't able to put in 3 years ago?
Let me start with that question first, because the answer is I'm actually writing my next book right now.
Okay.
So I'm actually adding all and enhancing that information. So my next book is really kind of a sequel to this first book. And it's, so it's not on a completely different, it's not switching off the topic. It's like, what have we learned about the health defenses that take things to the next level? So I will create not a spoiler, but a teaser. And I will tell you that the next level of where you go with your health defenses is the metabolism. So not only can you actually improve all your health defenses, but our health defenses are inextricably wired to our metabolism, and our metabolism's obviously wired to our ability to be able to control one of the most important organs in the body. And this is a bit of a surprise. Body fat is an organ. So while many people curse the amount of body fat that they actually have, the reality is, back to the set point, we want to kind of use fat to our advantage. And so that's what my next book is about.
Amazing.
Is sort of more in the health defenses, more taking it to the level of metabolism, and then taking it to actually managing fat finally for the right reasons. Now, let's talk about some foods that everybody should know about. I'm going to purposefully tell it to people through my own lens, because I want to tell people the foods that I actually enjoy. So I enjoy green tea. Okay, here's my Earl Grey, but I have got lots of tins of green tea. I enjoy coffee. So think about it. I got tea on one end and coffee in the other. Coffee, by the way, contains chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is a natural kind of insecticide that the coffee plant makes. And so, by the way, something we didn't get a chance to talk about is what research is really revealing about how we grow our plants. Turns out that the nibbles that insects do on plants, on the leaves and stems, are perceived by the mother plant as a wound. So the response to wound healing with these little nibbles that insects make is that the plant pumps out more bioactives like chlorogenic acid. So the organic coffee bean actually has more chlorogenic acid than the conventionally grown one, because the one that's conventionally grown has all these pesticides. Now you don't have as many nibbles. And so it's not only that you have less of the pesticides, less chemicals, but you got more of the good stuff, which is a good thing. So coffee, I love coffee. I love tea. I like, among leafy green vegetables, which we all know are good for us. I like Swiss chard. I like some forms of kale, dinosaur kale. I like to cook too. Yeah, dinosaur kale, most people don't realize that's kind of this, it's got this funny pattern that looks like dinosaur skin, which is why it's darker green. That's the kind of kale that is used to make minestrone soup. So you can actually cook with it, and you blend it into the background, and you get this wonderful dietary fiber in it. Mushrooms, I love mushrooms, all kinds of mushrooms. White button, the lowly white button mushroom, packed with a soluble fiber called beta-D-glucan, which boosts your immunity, starves cancer. Most people who get button mushrooms eat the cap. The stem, actually, it's got twice as much of the good stuff, so don't throw the stems away. Save those stems, make it into a soup, cut it up into a salad, stir fry it. There's all kinds of ways you can actually use the whole plant. I like dried mushrooms as well, like porcini mushrooms, which you can buy in a specialty store or order it online. Amazing flavor for stew or for or risotto, anything else you want to make, or a pasta. I love mushrooms. Spices and herbs, I like all kinds of spices and herbs. Rosemary, basil, turmeric, cinnamon, all of those types of spices. I love the flavors. They make your food taste a lot better. Seafood. I do like salmon, but oddly, as I got into looking at food lower in the food chain that actually has great, healthy omega-3 fatty acids, polyunsaturated acids, I found that sardines are really delicious. These tin sardines, and by the way, I started this in medical school, so I'm kind of giving you a confession. I didn't have time to cook a good meal. And so if I was late night and I wanted to whip up something, I'd boil some pasta, like usually some whole grain pasta, not very much. And I would sit around looking at some really good olive oil, some tin sardines, and squeeze a lemon. And I would literally boil the pasta, put it into a pan with a little olive oil. I'd open up a tin of sardines and just with a fork, cut it up, mix it up, put some fresh ground pepper, squeeze some lemon on it, and bam, had a Mediterranean meal. Yeah. So I actually do like seafood like that. A odd confession, I actually really love squid ink. So when you have squid ink pasta, or if you go to Spain or Italy, they have these squid ink actually cuts up the blood supply to cancer. It preserves your stem cells. So many different great ingredients. And I love a juicy pear, a peach in the summer. There's nothing much more that I love than a juicy peach. But those are just some of the foods that I love.
If you enjoyed watching that clip, here's another powerful clip that I think you will also really enjoy.
The whole idea of reducing sugar by just adding unlimited amounts of these chemicals has to be thought through, and we should be weaning people off ultra-sweetened products, which make them more likely, particularly kids, to seek sugar.